Hi, everyone. Welcome to another Home Tech. I'm Seth Johnson, and I'm joined, as always, by Jason Griffin. Jason, how you doing?
Oh, not bad, Seth. I'm recovering from a bit of a cold over here, so you'll have to bear with me. My voice is a little bit rough this week, but excited to sit down and record with you. I think we got a great show here. Understand you had taco night at your house.
It's taco night. I don't know how... Yeah.
I thought taco nights were on Tuesdays.
Well, yesterday, I think, was National Taco Day, and I missed it, so it was a makeup night.
Better late than never.
I had to get another taco.
Hey, I never met a taco I didn't like, so I'm a little bit jealous of you. We got some pot roast here tonight, though, so that's pretty good.
Well, tomorrow's going to be taco salad day, I'm pretty sure. Plenty of leftovers.
Hey, and tomorrow's going to be leftover pot roast.
Look, it's amazing how that works, huh?
Awesome. Well, hey, we got a really good show. We had Alex Capecelatro on from JoshAI, and I think that this is one of those companies that's just been a really interesting story to watch. It's taken me a little bit of time to understand what they're doing there and formulate an opinion about it, but I know you and I both had a chance to meet with them out at CEDIA. Came away impressed with their vision for the company. I think that they definitely are doing a lot of things that home technology professionals and even end users should be paying close attention to. I think voice control is getting a lot of attention in the home, and these guys are definitely coming at it from a unique angle. So one to watch.
Yeah, definitely. And like we talked about before on the show, and we'll talk about tonight, it's more than just a voice controlled system. Like it's a full home automation system that is fine to run standalone, by itself without any help from a larger control system like Control4, Elan, Crestron, any one of those. So it can kind of hold its own, I think.
Yeah, and as the name implies, the AI, the artificial intelligence portion is a big part of that. And so getting commands into it through your voice is just one piece, but really it's about the intelligence and just having a different way to control your home. So really enjoyed our conversation with Alex. Definitely stay tuned for that. As usual, we're going to jump into a few news stories before we get into that. But before we do that, we just want to send a huge thank you, as always, to our patrons, supporters of the show. If you're interested in learning about becoming a patron of Home Tech, you can learn that at HomeTech.fm/support. And that's a way that you can support our show for as little as $1 a month. We've got a lot of people who have signed up to do that, and we just want to give a huge thanks to those who have and encourage other listeners to go check that out. So again, HomeTech.fm/support.
Yep, and all the show notes that we'll talk about tonight will be over at HomeTech.fm/131. 131 shows. That's pretty cool.
Getting up there. Yeah, definitely. All right, well, let's jump right in. We got a few news stories here, a lot to cover. Seth, this first one I know was a big one that you pointed out, and sort of record-breaking DDoS attack, I'm told is how you say it. I've always said DDoS. Talk about what that is, Seth. I know I understand a little bit, but I think you have a better understanding, and for our listeners who may not be familiar with that term, clue us in.
Well, a denial of service attack is when somebody attacks like a web server and basically denies other users accessing it. So say I went to HomeTech.fm and did some nefarious things and shut down the entire server, that would be a denial of service. DDoS is a distributed denial of service attack, meaning from many, many, many places, all at once, a computer requests the web page. So it basically just overloads the server. The server doesn't know what to do. It can be so bad that it like backs up the router and everything from the ISP, and it can just keep going from there. It's a very expensive thing to get rid of. It's very complicated. Like it's not very complicated. Like you're just requesting a web page from thousands of computers at one time, and that essentially just shuts down the server. Now this was announced a couple weeks ago, and we were in the middle of doing our CEDIA coverage when it first came to light. But some things have kind of popped up where it's just like, no, we've got to talk about this. So this was a record-breaking 620 gigabit per second denial of service attack. Like this is massive. So think about that. Like your average internet connection, if you have like a fast one, is probably 20 megabytes per second. This is gigabits per second. So this is like massive amount of data that's just being requested, and it's just a tiny little URL string. So it's not very much data. There's just a lot of it going on at one time. And what it did, there's this guy, he's Krebs on security. He's a security blogger that has talked about China in the past, and China has attacked him a couple of times, and forced him off his original ISP. He was then picked up by a CDN, which is a content delivery network. Basically, they put servers all over the world, and whichever one you're closest to, you talk to. They basically said, no, we can't handle 620 gigabits per second. Like we're done. And I think now he's hosted over with a Google. I think it's called Google Shield. It's a service for journalists to protect them from these kind of things. So he's been able to keep his site up and going, but this massive attack, it came to light that it was all IoT devices that were being used to attack his website, which is something I was warning about at the very beginning of this year, and now it's a problem.
Definitely.
Yeah. So we always worry about IoT devices being hacked and people turning on and off your lights, but there's really not that much money in turning on and off your lights and harassing you, because what's going to happen? You're going to say, why are my lights turning on and off? Either the device is defective and I'll throw it away, or I'll realize that I need to change the password or update the firmware and fix it. The better thing to do, and the more profitable thing to do, is to go in, hack these things, and just have a zombie computer running out there somewhere on the network. And that's what somebody's done. They say there are about 25,000 cameras that have been hacked. And those cameras are being used for this DDoS attack, which is crazy to think about. 25,000 cameras. They're calling out one particular manufacturer. It's a Chinese manufacturer called Dahua. It's a shame, because I know that Dahua is used quite extensively in the CEDIA market, and I think you may know the brand IC Realtime. They use Dahua cameras and DVRs, so they've got a problem. But really, it comes down to the installer having the problem. We cannot be installing these security devices and leaving the default password on. And I guarantee you, if it comes to light how this happened, that's going to be how it happened. Somebody left admin.
Do you think that's, yeah, I was going to ask you that. I mean, do you think that, is it really that simple that it's just coming down to people, being lazy or forgetting to change the default passwords? Do you think that was at play here?
I definitely do. I've seen it happen in so many installs that I've been part of. And you can go on. I mean, there was a famous AXIS camera hack, not really hack, but you could go in and like do a Google search for a particular query that was very common for Axis cameras, and Google had gone out there and like basically scanned all of these Axis cameras, and if you did this web search, it would just list all of the Axis cameras, and they'd be wide open to the internet. You click on them and you'd be looking at somebody's driveway. Wow. Yeah, and this was years ago. So
unbelievable.
Guys, use a good router, put everything behind a firewall, and stop port forwarding, period. You need to start using DVRs and products that invoke no port forwarding. Like, just forget port forwarding. That's very bad. And use like a point-to-point solution, either a VPN or a DVR that does point-to-point natively. And if you can't provide that, stop selling DVRs, because this is horrible. This is bad. It's a black eye for our industry for sure.
It is, and it hits home. We hear these security stories a lot, and sometimes it comes across as a little bit of like, I don't know, maybe fear sells, and it's just the media sort of talking. But I mean, this hits home. If you're an IC real-time dealer and you aren't changing your default passwords, there's a very good chance that some of the equipment that you deployed was part of this attack, and you bear some responsibility for that. So I think this is definitely a wake-up call to the industry for people to really get adamant about that. I mean, that's got to be part of your standard workflow. And if you're a consumer or end user, that's definitely something to make sure. It's a very valid question if you're working with a home technology professional, to make sure that that's part of their process, that they're going to change all of those default passwords and hold them accountable for that, because it's something that can easily get forgot in the context of a big project when there's a lot of things going on, but it's absolutely vital.
Yep. And there wasn't very long ago that, if you're a Control 4 dealer, you guys out there, you know who you are. You know the default password. If I go to Show Dan right now and search for Control 4, there are, in the United States, 316 devices that are online and basically have port forwarded to themselves. That's horrible. Yeah, you're leaving a controller online or a touchscreen with access straight to the internet. That shouldn't be done. You guys, we know better as installers, and I'm sorry if you know the password, I know the password. Somebody else can know the password and go in there and make one of these devices a zombie device that can go out and cause one of these, denial of service attacks.
Yeah. I can't tell you how many times when I was more out in the field years ago, doing programming and setting up, really small, basic residential networks, and I would come across, a homeowner who had a modem or router from the ISP that, for whatever reason, we were taking over the network and I needed to get into in order to change some settings. And I would just go do a quick Google search, and I would say default password for, Motorola SB 571 or whatever it was. And like 95% of the time, I would plug those default passwords into their modem or router and it would work. And it always just amazed me how, and I don't think, honestly, that it's so much a matter of laziness on the consumer's part when that happens. I think it's just forgetfulness, or maybe the ISP installer is probably doing a bad job of explaining that needs to be changed. Who knows what it is? But at the end of the day, it's such a simple thing to do, and it's just so critical. I remember when I was talking to Digital Butler out at Cedia, one of the RSM companies that we highlighted, one of the interesting features they had, small part of their feature set, obviously, but it was the ability to scan the network and do a search for, they have this whole database of default login information, and it would go out and scan your network, and it would give you an alert if there was anything on your network that was using default passwords, which I thought was a pretty cool idea, a neat feature.
That's very smart, very smart. I just kind of do want to follow up. I said it was 25,000 cameras. It's actually more than 150,000 cameras. Dahua spokesperson has basically said, we strongly recommend that users upgrade the firmware of all devices and set strong passwords to reduce risks. Duh. And Control 4...
And change your default password.
Yep. Control 4 for years has said, do not, DMZ a controller. Do not set it out on the network. Do not use port forwarding. They offer a foresight service that you can use that creates a super strong VPN from the controller to your phone. And they offer that, so use it. Stop doing port forwarding, because that's just a horrible practice.
Well, good stuff here, and definitely an important conversation. Let's move on. We've got some more big news here we want to cover, and this is very relevant to our interview, which again is coming up with Alex Capecelatro of JoshAI. Make sure you stay tuned for that. Big announcements from Google this week. They had a big event, mainly highlighted their new Pixel phone, but a significant part of the presentation was devoted to the new Google Home product, which is basically Google's answer to Amazon Echo. And Seth, you did a great job, a great write-up of this on our website, HomeTech.fm. You can click over to the blog there. And Seth, I thought you did a great job of giving the bullet points and the rundown of what this device is all about. We've known it was coming. It was hinted at a while back, but the big news here is that it's now available for pre-order at $129, and it looks like it's going to set to ship just about a month from now on November 4th.
Yeah, very exciting. $129 also gets you 6 months of YouTube Red, which is the paid-for version of YouTube. Doesn't have ads, all that good stuff. I was pretty excited to see this. What I didn't like about the keynote was they just showed canned demos. They did say that they had them upstairs, so after the keynote, the press could go upstairs and play with them. But for the keynote, they basically ran off a script, and I really don't like that. I'd rather them have used the actual product on stage. But
you think they weren't confident, or do you think it was just worried about the environment, or maybe a little of both? I mean, what do you think?
It looked like a big warehouse. I imagine that they were probably worried about the environment. What was funny was every time he said, "Okay, Google," somebody's phone in the audience would go off. Evidently, you couldn't hear that, but every single time he said it, somebody's phone would go off. And
Funny.
you couldn't hear it on the live stream, but some of the reporters were talking about it afterward. What I do like about this, let's touch on two different products that were also introduced that we didn't really know were coming, and then we'll bring those back to Google Home. The first was Google Wi-Fi, and this is another mesh Wi-Fi networked system. So kind of think about Eero, Luma, Ubiquiti's Amplify, those types of systems where you buy 1, 2, 3 different access points depending on the size of your home, and they all kind of mesh together. Google is coming in pretty strong here with a really good solution for $199 for one a single pack, or $299 for 3, which I think was about $100 less than some of those other competitors. I thought that was pretty cool.
Yeah, pretty competitive price point. If I had just a little bit more free time, I would have come up with a new Wi-Fi system sound effect by now. I'm slacking on that.
Yeah, it's crazy how many of these we've seen pop up.
It's a lot.
Yeah, and these set up with the same Google same app, I think, that the OnHub used. And if you had an OnHub, you could buy 1 or 2 of these things, and they would mesh together too. So it's kind of from that same team. It feels like they want to have a solid foundation in the home, and this is how Google is saying and suggesting that people do it. I think it's a pretty good idea. And if anybody knows about networking, it's probably Google. They seem to have a pretty good offering here, and I would definitely look at it if I was in the market for something like this, especially for the price point. It's pretty good.
Yeah, definitely. I think it's been one of the surprise stories of the year. We've joked about it, but this has been like the year of Wi-Fi. We've seen so many of these new Wi-Fi systems come out. This mesh Wi-Fi. I think clearly there's a market there in terms of, these manufacturers are seeing more and more connected devices become available for the home, and obviously all that stuff has got to live on the network. And so everybody's it's a little bit of a land grab right now. And I think Google clearly has a pretty good looking lineup here, and they'll be a serious contender for a lot of reasons that are pretty obvious. So I know the product that you wanted to get to, and I was excited to see, is this new Chromecast Ultra, I believe is what they're calling it. So 4K.
Yeah, 4K with HDR. And what I thought was killer about it is that it has an Ethernet port built into the little power dongle that comes off the back of it. The device is so small, it really just has enough room for its components, this little USB power Ethernet cable plug, and then an HDMI cable coming off the other side. The price point on this is just staggering to think about. It's $69 for a 4K HDR player. Now there comes we talked about this a little bit at Cedia, but if you're getting all of your 4K content from a $69 device, it's really going to be hard to start justifying some of these video distribution products in the future. And I really think that we kind of need to wake up and see what these devices are doing and how they will affect our business, not in the next 6 months, but maybe 2 years down the road. I mean, video distribution for integrators is a very, very large part of their business, I would say. The bigger jobs you have, they're going to have video distribution. But I think these little devices are going to start serving people in ways that we're not imagining right now. You think about plugging one of these things in to a receiver. Really, all you're going to need is a remote to kick it off. And once it's on, it's going to send the CEC command, which by all accounts is mostly working now. It'll turn on the receiver, turn on the TV, and you have what is a Chromecast with 4K content being able to be put on it.
Yeah. No, it's pretty slick. And I think you're right. I think the days of video distribution being useful in a broad market are numbered. I think there's always going to be those applications in very large homes and things like that where I think it'll have its place. But I think the question is really how long, and I think it comes down to content. I think it all comes down to content. And right now, if you plug in a Chromecast, you've got a lot of different things you can choose from and various apps. But I think streaming content is still struggling. I think about myself as a big sports fan. Go Broncos. right? And there's not a lot of
poor Tampa Bay.
Yeah, sorry, man. That was tough. I was thinking about you.
Yeah, I'm sure you were.
Yeah. But in any event, I think that it's getting better. I know there are ways to stream football games now and whatever, but it's not easy to the point where an everyday consumer is necessarily going to be savvy enough to figure that out. So I think that just the set-top cable box and having a few of those to pipe around the house, that may stick around for a while. But I agree. I mean, this sort of device is a game changer. When you talk about things like Chromecast being able to do 4K, you tuck it behind the TV, you plug it in, $69. You put one of these on every TV in the house, and voila, you've got an amazingly powerful video streaming solution for a minuscule amount of money. So I agree with you wholeheartedly. Whether you're a consumer or home technology professional, thinking about how you're going to handle video in maybe a home you're building or doing a remodel or whatever, yeah, you've got to account for this stuff. It is, it's here, it's real, and it's super powerful.
Yep. Yeah, this is, to use another sports analogy, the puck is definitely heading that direction. And if we're skating a different way, we're not going to meet up with that puck, period. Like we've got to start looking at where this technology, these apps, like you said, with football, that's gotten a lot better. MLB has been streaming for a number of years. I mean, it's HBO Now, HBO Go. Those are doing very well too. So it's only a matter of time before Comcast, Time Warner start just putting apps right on the Chromecast.
They have their apps. Yeah.
And you're just going to get your content right from those.
Yeah. And I think that's where it's got to get more of the mainstream adoption to the point where it will really take over as, input zero, which we've talked about before, and being the primary input that people are watching, which right now, by and large, is your cable or satellite provider. It just takes a little bit too much effort right now to go out and say, okay, make sure I'll sign up for my MLB app to watch my baseball games, and then I've got my NFL streaming account over here, and then I've got HBO Go here. And for guys like you and me and people in our audience, that's not a big deal at all. But for the vast majority of the population, it's just too much work, and you got to keep track of where all this stuff is. And most people are just busy. They come home from work and they just want to grab a remote and hit a button and watch the football game.
Well, so this goes one step further, because what Google showed was that the Chromecast will integrate with Google Home. So you come in, you say, okay, Google, show me Stranger Things on Netflix, I think is the example that they gave. And you're watching Stranger Things. It's not a leap to say, it's just a couple of lines of programming to say, Google, show me CBS channel 12 and have it show up on your TV. Like, that's going to happen, and it's going to happen sooner than we realize.
Hey, Google, put on the Broncos game.
Exactly.
Right. And I think that's a great point, because when it does get there, and we're close, I agree, from a technological perspective,
I think we're
pretty
there.
close. It's just, yeah. I guess to a certain extent, yeah. I have, again, to me, it comes down to what's available on what app, and that's where I would still have to dive in and really look at it and say, okay, what apps are available here on this device, and how does that work, and all that. So I agree with you from a technical perspective. Yes, we're probably there, but I do also think it still takes a little bit of digging to figure that all out.
Oh, we're basically waiting on content providers to catch up, right? We're waiting on Time Warner to ship an app that Google Home can integrate with. And that takes the integration away from us, but it's going to put the integration on Google and Time Warner, which both have a pretty decent financial reason to make it work. So,
right. Well, and that was a big part of what Google talked about in terms of making this a platform for development, and, having people like Netflix or Comcast basically be able to develop to the platform and tie into, I think, what they're calling direct actions or whatever it is. So it's a direct action. I say to Google, hey, Google, turn on the Broncos game. And it's smart enough to know that the Broncos game is available on the Time Warner app on CBS, and it just does it. And I don't have to think about it. And that's a pretty powerful proposition. And we're pretty darn close to being able to make that a reality.
Yep. And we're unfortunately seeing in kind of a side effect of this is that it was reported, and I really haven't been able to track down if this is true or not, but it was pretty well reported that Google was saying to the manufacturers, "Hey, we want you on board with the Chromecast stuff, and if you're going to be on board with Chromecast, you're going to support Google Home, and we're going to cut you off, and you won't be able to integrate with Amazon Echo." I'm really hoping that's not the case. I'm really hoping that manufacturers will be able to integrate with whatever they want to integrate with, and be able to do it well. But according to rumors and that kind of thing, is Google is kind of strong arming and saying, hey, if you're a casting device, if you could use Chromecast, hey, we want you to work with Google Home and nothing else. And kind of sucks to see these walls going up around the gardens, but I guess it's almost inevitable that somebody was going to try that. I just hope it's not Google.
I'm with you, though. I really, really hope that's not true.
Yeah.
Having a hard time telling just by reading the stories. It's hard on the internet, and you're reading things that sound true, but who knows? And so at this point, I would consider that speculation. But yeah. I wouldn't put it past Google to do that, to kind of strong arm and use some muscle there to try to corner the market a little bit.
Yeah, and get the product off the ground a little bit. I mean, there's some very compelling things about Google Home. Like it's launching with Nest integration, of course, Smart Things, Philips Hue, and If This Then That right out of the box. And they're talking about more integrations with other services down the road. So
right. And didn't that seem that struck me as a little funny to see Nest on that list, because like they're kind of the same company. And so anyways, kind of a side note, but
what was Google even stranger during the keynote, they said, we teamed up with Nest or something like that. It was very awkward.
Yeah.
Like you would think,
I thought that was, I found that,
but you got to think,
I found that strange as well.
You got to think this comes from like the Chromecast team. It was introduced from the Chromecast team and not the Nest team, which is kind of, I would say, embarrassing for the Nest team. I mean, they were bought for $3 billion. Revolve was purchased and folded into them. Like this is a division of Google that should be doing some really awesome things, and they really haven't released anything. And to have,
but they made an outdoor camera.
Yeah, well, it was basically a camera with a longer cable, is what they released. We saw that at Cedia, but. I mean, I don't want to harp on Nest too much. I do think that's an interesting
story, though. Yeah, I don't either. We can move on from that. But I do think it's an interesting tangent that this is not from the Nest division. Yeah. This is from like the Chromecast team. I did find that interesting.
Yeah, and I kind of summed it up there on the story. We'll link to in the show notes as well. If I was starting DIY today, this is where I would honestly start. I mean, it's got integrations with Smart Things, If This Then That, and Nest. I mean, it's really hard at 129 to pass this up, and you get voice control. You get the really cool Google Assistant that they're pushing. We talked about that a little bit in the interview, but like 40 plus languages this is going to support. So it's a worldwide device, and there's a lot of things that are really compelling about it. So I think it kind of takes the Amazon Echo and just kind of says, off to the side with you. We actually have the real development put on this stuff. Yeah.
Potential to do that. Absolutely. And, we didn't touch on it, just hit it real quick. It is a speaker, of course. So a lot of these can be put around your house and turned into a little distributed audio system. I think one last thing I want to touch on as it pertains to Google Home and how it's going to compare and stack up against Alexa. I think what Google has going for it that's pretty obvious is just that deep knowledge. They talked about the knowledge graph in their presentation, and just they've spent 18 years building up this amazing amount of data that they can tap into. And I think that's really going to bode well for them in terms of developing a solution that can understand natural language. It can, get you the answers you need. And I think Amazon's going to have a hard time catching up with that.
Yep, absolutely. I mean, they just now started shipping in the UK, and there's not very much difference between US English and UK English. Like there's a couple of words they spell wrong. Hi guys. But there's like not very much difference between those two languages. It's not like you're going from English to Chinese or Vietnamese or something. Like it's a very similar language and structure. So I I think Amazon's going to actually, they've been the darling for the last couple of years, but I think they're going to have a tough road ahead of them with products like Google. And of course, Siri in the can is still a contender that could be released any day now, maybe next year, who knows? But there's some kind of event coming up with Apple.
We'll keep an eye on it.
Yeah.
Definitely. Well, one more story. Let's move through, and we're going to touch on this one a little bit quicker so we can get into our interview, but definitely did want to give a nod to Julie Jacobson over at CE Pro for an article she did this week just about the DIY trend and what's going on there. And I thought it was a really unique perspective. We talk about this a lot on the show and the proliferation of DIY technology into the space and what does that all mean. And I think she made a great point. I think it's easy for us as home technology professionals to assume that consumers are gravitating towards this sort of technology just because it's at a lower price point. I think that certainly plays into it. Obviously, that's a factor. There's no doubt. But the point of her article was that a lot of it also comes down to just simple convenience. And sometimes people just want to sit down on a computer and read a few reviews and then click buy on Amazon and have something show up at their door. And they don't want to necessarily go through the whole process of working with a salesman or working with a company. And I just thought that was interesting. It's food for thought. Clearly, those are different market segments. And for somebody who's building a new home, a lot of those people are going to be more inclined to go work with a specialist, or maybe one will be recommended to them by their builder or architect. But I thought, again, food for thought, definitely worth a read. And there was some very interesting, if you're going to read the article, would highly encourage you to also read the comment section, because there was some pretty spirited dialogue there, which didn't surprise me at all, having written similar articles over at Residential Systems that, people, this is a hot topic, and it can touch a nerve with people for sure.
Well, I'll go a step further and say there's a lot of guys who just like to have their heads in the sand, that nothing's going to change in this industry. But I mean, I think she makes an excellent point about Snap AV, saying how quickly they succeeded entering the marketplace with initially marginal products. If we're going to be honest with ourselves, like, they weren't the best racks, they weren't the best mounts, they weren't the best wiring and HDMI cables at all. But they came in with a portal and a website that you could go on and click with a few clicks, 2:00 in the morning, order product and have it show up within a few days, no questions asked. Like, that's what we want. As integrators, why do we think that our customers want their experience with us to be any different? They don't want to have that friction. And look, we're used to selling to baby boomers these days. Like, baby boomers, they're going away. Millennials are coming. They're a bigger generation. They have a lot more money than baby boomers, and they're going to be buying our products, and they have completely different shopping habits than the baby boomers did. So business models have to change, because you can't keep selling to baby boomers. Eventually, they're all going to die out, and you're not going to have any customers left if that's what your business is set up to serve. Food for thought. Check out this article.
Yeah.
I thought it was really, really well written. And that part about having good service nowadays is often about no service at all, meaning make the process to buy, sell, install the stuff as easy as possible, as frictionless as possible. I think that's
Get out of the way.
That's where we need to head. We need to head that direction for sure.
Yeah, well, I thought you nailed it there. I don't have anything to add that you didn't touch on. And again, we'll just encourage the home technology professionals in our audience, of which I know there are many, to go check out this article if you haven't. So I think without any further delay, let's jump into our interview here. One last quick mention. Thank you again to our patrons. If you want to learn a little bit more about how you can support the show, once again, that URL is HomeTech.fm/support, and that will give you some more information about how you can get behind us for as little as $1 a month. But with that, let's jump into our conversation here with Alex Capecelatro of JoshAI. Hey, Alex, welcome to the show. How are you?
I'm doing great. How about you guys?
Doing very well. Thank you so much for taking the time to come on here and chat with us. We look forward to diving in and talking about JoshAI. But before we do that, why don't you give our listeners just a quick personal introduction and maybe talk about some of your background in the technology industry?
Sure. So my name's Alex Capecelatro. I live in Los Angeles. but my company is based out of Denver, and so we have half the company there and half the company here. We've been doing this for about 2 years now. I've got a bit of a weird background. Long story short, was building websites in middle school. That turned into a bike company. That turned into doing research experiments in my basement. Left high school to go work for the government. Spent the next 8 years working as a chemist and a sort of a materials engineer in a number of national labs, a couple NASA facilities. Joined an electric car company, grew with that for a little bit. I left a year before the company basically went under, ran a software company for 5 years, and now I'm doing this. So I've gotten to touch quite a bit of technology, and it's been a pretty amazing ride so far.
Yeah, that's great. Sounds like a pretty deep background there, and obviously, I'm sure that's allowed you to acquire a pretty deep skill set, and so we're excited to see you applying this into the CEDIA space with JoshAI, and we're going to talk in a lot of detail about it and what makes it unique. But just give us the really quick elevator pitch. If I'm Joe on the street and I have no idea about technology, and I ask you, what is JoshAI? How do you answer that?
Sure. JoshAI is an artificial intelligence for the home. We're really focused around natural user input, where voice is central to what we do. So imagine controlling your home by just talking to it.
Very cool.
Very good. Simple enough. Yep. And really quickly, just tell us about when the company was founded. You mentioned you're based in Denver. How many people do you have on your team? Just some of the bullet points there.
Sure. So we're about a dozen people now. The company was founded in March of 15. So I guess we're about a year and a half old right now. Tim, my co-founder and CTO, is Denver-based. I'm LA-based. And so when we started the company, we just hired, our first employee was in Denver, second was in LA, and we just kind of gone back and forth. So we've got a pretty equal grounding in both places.
Very cool. I had the pleasure of meeting both you and Tim at the show this year. And tell us about what the problems you were trying to solve with JoshAI were. Like what specifically did you identify with the existing products that are out there that said, hey, you know what, I can do that better?
Sure. So there are a couple of things. And one of the things that's really interesting to bring up is Tim and I, in many ways, have a shared vision, but different motivations, I guess, to what brought us to this. In Tim's particular case, he's a big sci-fi geek, and he's been programming AI-related software since high school, and he's now 62. So he's been at it for quite a while. For him, the idea of a Jarvis or Star Trek type, voice control system that you can command from was sort of the childhood goal, right? The idea of being able to just talk to your computer and have everything around you function and react accordingly. And for him, it was kind of that. It was that sci-fi type idea of you often hear these quotes, we dreamed of flying cars, and where are they? Well, Tim's perspective was let's actually bring some of this futuristic sci-fi to life, and now was kind of a time where all the technology was together. On my side, it was a little different. Prior to starting the company, I'd actually never seen a Star Wars movie or Star Trek. Actually, I'm a pretty bad nerd. I've since tried to catch up, but it's just not the way that I was brought up. But for me, I really get excited around introducing technology, but not for technology's sake, for innovation's sake, to people in a way that improves their life and gives them just a better overall experience with their day-to-day tasks, what they're working on, what they're doing. So in the past, one of my efforts was a biomedical company. I was trying to cure a disease. Spent a lot of time where I was really passionate about helping people and making an impact. And so when we were talking about possibly working together, and Tim was sharing what he was doing and I was sharing with him what I was doing, the thing we kept coming back to, this was over the last probably 5 or 6 years now, we kept coming back to the fact that we both were super obsessed about AI. And AI isn't just one thing. It's a collection of various technologies that allow you to interact with a computer as you would like a person. And we kept finding everything from the speech to text component, which is often referred to as ASR, automatic speech recognition, to the neural nets that are going on for actually understanding what's being said and learning. A lot of the machine learning algorithms, the facial recognition algorithms, a lot of the technology that would enable this type of stuff, it was finally getting there. And we see a lot of these algorithms already in production. They're already in play in a number of different fields and verticals. But while we were having these just geeky conversations about our passion and what we're working on, we're both reflecting on our struggles with building homes. So Tim has a house in Aspen, a result of the last company he sold and did quite well on, but he's now building a house in Denver that's massive. It's just a really big project, and he was trying to figure out what should he put in there, not as the guy trying to build the technology, but just as a consumer. So he was looking at Crestron and Control 4 and Savant and all this stuff. Meanwhile, I was about maybe 6 months into what ended up being a 3-year renovation project here in LA. And for me, it was kind of the same thing. I mean, we initially had a control system and decided to just take it out. It was old, it was clunky, and we went with the whole app approach, right? We had the Sonos app, the Lutron app, the Nest app, and in a way, it was sort of the best of what we could do. It felt like the right way as a consumer to live with the stuff in my home. But obviously, having a suite of apps that are all disconnected isn't really the ideal. The ability to set up easy scenes so you can activate, things, kind of magically is way more fun. But then the idea of what would the ideal experience look like for both of us? And this isn't, again, as the entrepreneur or as the manufacturer. This is as a homeowner. How do we want to interact with our homes? And so Tim, of course, was coming from the sci-fi perspective, and I was coming from the perspective of, I've got a father who's 75 who doesn't know how to turn a computer on, but he knows how to ask my mom to turn a light on. And so voice was one of these things that just made so much sense, but it really goes beyond voice, right? The idea is, if you come home after dark and open the door, the light should just go on. If you're by yourself, maybe some music should come on. And if you're with someone, it's a different type of music, or maybe no music at all. And the thing that's so interesting is we all have very simple routines for the most part. 80% of the time, we do the same stuff in the morning, the same stuff when we come home from work, the same stuff on the weekends in terms of the home, in terms of our lights and our shades and our fans and all that. And so what Tim and I were kind of discussing was the best of the industry didn't really seem that exciting. And oddly enough, I know we'll get to this later, but oddly enough, we also talked about everything seems super expensive. It didn't make sense that the pricing that we kept getting quoted on was 10% of the home's value. That's what Crestron often leads with. So if you have a $1 million home, expect to spend $100,000, and obviously that just goes up as the homes get bigger. To us, it seemed crazy that the technology in your computer and in your phone and even in your car is so much less expensive and so much more powerful. So really the foundation was the sci-fi concept on Tim's perspective. For me, it was all about the user experience and using technology to make people's lives easier and better, coupled with this market opportunity where things just feel very expensive, very sort of hard to reach. Most people we know with Control 4 systems or other systems like that tend to struggle with even using them. The control systems are pretty clunky and hard to use. At least historically, that's been true. And so we thought, let's try to make this better, but also let's just make it for ourselves because we want this as a consumer.
Right. But you haven't, I mean, from what we've heard, and I granted, we talked a little bit at the CD show, but we really didn't talk pricing. You guys are targeting more the higher end price point too at this point, right?
Yeah. So I think it's really important to build a business that has the ability to actually grow on revenue, not on investment. The whole Silicon Valley of raise a bunch of money, have no revenue is a little crazy. I've done it. I don't really want to do it again. And when you look at Google Home that just announced for $130 and the Echo Dot for $50, they're losing money on the hardware, hands down. There's no way they're selling those for a profit. And so what we rationed was there are always going to be these gigantic homes that basically will spend whatever it costs to have the ideal experience. It's not really about budget. And those homes are few and far between, but there are enough of them out there to get started. And if we start at that high end and basically develop for those big complicated homes, over time, the thought is we'll come down market. It's always going to be easier to function in a 2,500 square foot home if you can function in a 25,000 square foot home from a software perspective. And the idea is that at a high price point, you can have a small number of customers basically cash flow the business. So you're not just burning on investment funds, but you're actually building a profitable business. And so Tesla is kind of the model that has been most vocal about this. They call it the Elon's master plan. which was a small number of units of the Roadster at well over 120K, funded the development of the Model S, which was a little bit less expensive, a little bit higher in volume. And that ultimately is funding the development of the Model 3, which is the mass market, low cost, high volume. We're kind of taking the same approach, the idea of getting in a small number of homes, being very service oriented so we can guarantee these consumers have the best experience possible. But in doing it that way, we can be profitable quickly and allow us to basically develop downstream over time.
Yep, that makes sense completely. You can see that working for them with the Tesla, and I can see it working for you guys, especially in the markets that you're targeting. Those homeowners have traditionally been willing and I would say like early adopters, right? Like we're still in that phase. We haven't really come full circle or fully into the mass adoption of this product or any home automation products, really. It's still kind of in the early adoption phase. So I think it's a little bit easier to get into people's hands who want, like you said, want the best experience and want something to use that just works, no matter the price.
Yeah, the other thing really quick about that, which is interesting to note, if you look at the average, let's say $5 million home today, obviously the average home's not $5 million, but in terms of these big mansions, these big homes, the average $5 million home is going to have connected lighting, whole home distributed audio and video, the garage doors, the sprinklers, everything's basically going to be networked. And that's just the way it is, right? If you're spending $10 million on a home, you're going to put in the money to get everything automated and controlled from an app. And so we find that there's a very small percentage of big, expensive homes that don't already have products that we can integrate with. But if you come down market today, if you look at the average $500,000 home, it probably doesn't have connected lighting, full home distributed audio and video, a lot of the products that we want to work with. And that's today. We think that's rapidly changing the pace of the lower cost IoT devices that are competing with the higher end products, the big boys. It's staggering how fast these are coming out. But it's not there today, and it certainly wasn't there when we started the company. So the idea, besides just starting at the high end and working down, is as a software company, as a control company, we want to go into the homes that have devices that we can actually work with. And today, that's definitely at the high end. And we imagine that whole trend is moving down. Not imagine, we see the data, right? It is. But the idea is it's not there yet.
Yeah. It's a more stable market. It's a more stable market, period. Like you said, the products are more stable, but also the market is more stable because in those homes, people are expecting these products to exist. Let's switch over to JoshAI itself. Tell us a little bit about what it is when I buy a JoshAI system. What am I getting? What hardware? What software? How does this software? I guess you said it's a software company. How does it exist?
Sure. So the product that we're shipping now, we call the Josh Pro, and we're shipping on a Mac Mini in terms of the server that's doing all the processing. And that Mac Mini comes with an iPad primarily because we want you to, out of the box, be able to have basically a user interface with a microphone that you can play with. The idea is in a big home, an iPad's not really going to get you all the way there, but it gives you a great initial sort of experience with the product. That Mac Mini is plugging into the local network. It's doing all the natural voice, natural language processing. It's doing all the device control, but it's also doing all the learning. So this is where we're tracking patterns and understanding of what's going on in the home, which devices get triggered after which other ones or which ones happen during certain times. And so we do a lot of local processing on that Mac Mini. And so that's sort of the physical package that comes when you buy the Josh Pro. With that, you've got unlimited user support, unlimited devices. I think we've hit close to 500 devices in a home, and we're nowhere near the limit that we're going to get to. You've got remote access on any device, unlimited app downloads. So Android, iPhone, iPad, web, all that kind of stuff, a full integration with the Echo. And the idea is that a big component of that as well is the remote service. So we're basically making ourselves available. We'll go out and do the install in person with the integrator. We want the relationship to definitely be between the integrator and the homeowner. But for the integrator's perspective, they've got us whenever they need. They'll call us. you know, on weekends at 2 a.m., whatever time they need. And we're basically saying for the price that we're charging, we want to give you the best service that we can provide. And so it's sort of that very high end, high touch type experience for these clients.
Well, and that's super important, obviously. If you're going to come at it from a high price point, I think delivering that service and hands-on, help with the installation and setup, I think that's critical. So I think that's a smart move on your guys' part. The physical installation obviously sounds very simple. You're basically plugging in a computer. What about the software setup, initial programming? Can you walk us through a little bit about what that looks like?
Sure. So when you plug in the system, we immediately discover all the devices on the network. If the devices are Sonos, we've immediately got full access over them. We pull in the name they have on Sonos. So if you had a kitchen Sonos, you can say play Bob Dylan in the kitchen immediately with no configuration. It's just going to work. Lutron's kind of the same, but we think a little more magical because there's a lot more going on. If there's a Lutron Radio Rod 2 or HomeWorks QS setup, we do the same with Caseta, but it's a little different with Caseta. But for Rod 2 and HomeWorks QS, we immediately basically discover the XML file that exists for Lutron, download that, use that to create the rooms based on what Lutron had programmed, put the devices in those rooms, and that's all automatic. So within seconds, you can say, turn on the lights in the kitchen and close the blinds in the living room. And if you had those Lutron devices, that would just work. There are some devices like Nest that need to be authorized, or security cameras that might be behind a username password. And so we've got a very easy web portal that allows you to authorize the devices. Sometimes you want to drag and drop devices into different rooms. For example, my Lutron setup at home had the kitchen separate from sort of one side of the kitchen. We call the kitchen south living wing. And it's just a big kitchen, but when you say turn off lights in the kitchen, you want it to all go off together. So one thing I did was I just combined those two rooms really quickly in the interface. There's no programming there to do it. It's all just drag and drop type of stuff. But that's sort of what's going on. And then whenever you add devices, for the most part, it auto gets discovered because we're constantly pinging and checking on what's happening on the network. But there are some devices that you just do a quick discovery process for if needed, which is why it still does make sense for the integrator to do quite a bit of this. We then push out updates. It averages to be about once a week or once every 2 weeks. But the idea is that you're buying this living organism in a way. That Josh isn't static. You buy it once it's done. Over the air, we're pushing updates that, again, kind of like what Tesla does. You're getting more functionality. You're getting a better user interface. It's getting pushed out. And so the whole idea is that we try to make this as natural and sort of as intuitive as possible. Right now, we support all in a couple hundred different devices. For the most part, 95 to 98% of what we see in any new home is already covered. And then there's oftentimes the one or two exceptions of some odd duck, product that we hadn't built for yet. So then what we do is we optimize new products that we build support for based on what's in the homes that we're in and what the integrators that we work with sell. And once we push out that update, it obviously goes out for everyone. So as soon as we have, an integration working for Google Home, when it's out there, we build it once and everyone would have that update all at the same time. So it's this constantly evolving software infrastructure.
Gotcha. Sounds very cool. So you talked about a lot of the different products you control. I'm curious, I know as a longtime home technology professional, we don't relish in it, but a lot of the devices that we control are still done through relatively non-sophisticated technology, namely things like infrared or RS-232 for entertainment devices like cable boxes or TVs. Do you have any mechanism for controlling those, maybe through various partnerships? I know you guys are working with Crestron, I believe you were showing at CEDIA. What is your plan to address those types of consumer electronic devices?
Definitely. So our viewpoint as a startup, just in general, is to always be forward thinking and to try to think about where the trend is going, which is definitely all towards IP. IP control is hands down what every new product is all about. Sure. That being said, IR and RS-232 are not going away anytime soon. We see products with those in most of the homes we're in. Right now, the simplest solution we work with is global cache, and that allows us to just do IP to IR or IP to RS-232. And most of the integrators we work with love global cache. It's a great, reliable, stable product, priced very, very accordingly, very fairly. So that's often what we end up doing. That said, the Crestron integration we mentioned, there are times that there's some pretty intricate matrix switching and custom setups going on that involve Crestron hardware. And our integration with Crestron allows all that to be triggered pretty easily using scenes and other things like that. But yeah, I would say it's mainly integrations with companies like Crestron and products like Global Cache that allow us to have that native control.
Very cool. And being not a cloud-based system, I mean, you're able to have a device inside the house, low latency control over these devices fairly easily, right? Or does the voice control rely on a cloud service, or is it built into the Mac?
The answer is a little bit of both. The reality is we spend a lot of time thinking about being a complete local, processing, product, if you will. And the reality is more and more the products that we work with are cloud-based. And I don't just mean the device itself, but I mean what the device is needing to function properly. So for example, Sonos isn't necessarily cloud-based, but all the streaming services are. And if we look back, 5 or 10 years ago, there was a lot more local music than we see today. The average home we go into today, they're streaming Pandora, Spotify, iHeartRadio. And so even if your internet were down and we had full local control, you're going to be disappointed that you can't play music that you're used to playing. So we're very much focused on a whole network capability because that's where a lot of these devices live. And as a result, we have a whole cloud infrastructure, which is what enables the remote access. When I'm not at home, the way that I'm able to get into my Josh server at home is routing through the cloud. And so it's really kind of tightly wound between what's in the cloud and what's local. And there's also a lot of redundancy back and forth.
Very cool. Very cool. I know we spoke a little bit at CD about the Crestron partnership, and I just kind of want to loop back and touch on that a little bit. Do you see Josh being a supplement to Crestron systems, or a replacement, or maybe down the road is it a replacement?
Yeah, so we have a number of projects today where people are, by people I mean the integrator with their customer, are talking about the options, and the options can be Crestron or maybe a Control 4 system or a Josh system or Crestron with Josh. And at this point in time, what we find is there's certain integrators who want to put in Crestron into all their homes. They know it really well. They love Crestron hardware. And, quite frankly, if they're going to do Crestron lighting, you can't really control the Crestron lighting without the Crestron, controller. And so at this point, it's very much, what's the best way to put it? In some cases, we sit on top of or work with Crestron very well for projects that want to use Crestron for a variety of reasons. In other cases, people choose to use Josh instead of Crestron. And it really just depends on the particular installment, what's going into the home.
Very cool. That makes sense. I mean, I can tell you as an integrator, like there are only so many products I'm very comfortable with working with, and even those can kind of fall off the table sometimes. But I can understand that comfort level as an integrator in their business, having using one of their mainline products and then being able to put JoshAI over the top, and then as you guys move forward, you may be able to integrate. Well, I know with Crestron, like you said, you have to have that processor, just like Lutron. You have to have the processor in place to control the lights. It makes sense to have the products that I feel comfortable putting in, and then supplement the interface that I want the clients to experience those products on top. So I think that's a pretty cool idea and a pretty good plan that you guys put together on that. Let's move a little bit down market and talk a little bit about Google Home and some of the more interesting announcements that have happened this week. You mentioned at the very beginning that Google Home was introduced at the $130 price point. What do you think about that? It's a very interesting product.
First off, I'm super excited that they launched this. I mean, when they first announced it, was it like 3 to 6 months ago? It seemed very promising, but it also, like a lot of Google products, seemed like it might not actually happen because they've been known to talk about a number of efforts and projects that don't really come together. When this was announced that it's $130, buy it now, it ships basically in a month, that was awesome because the Amazon Echo is a fantastic product, and I just think the more players in the space, the more options for the customer, it's just going to push everything forward. The thing that's really interesting, though, is Google's showing for the first time some real native, Chromecast audio and video control that is unprecedented. And I'm just excited to see that integration come together because it's so exciting. It's something the consumer really can't get today.
Yeah, definitely. I think it's an exciting new category, and I'm still struggling to define it in a simple way, but it's just this idea of, stationary, always listening voice control devices or VUIs, voice user interfaces. I think it's fascinating to me to watch how this is developing. I know that you guys are currently doing an Amazon Echo integration. I think you've got that going already. Am I correct on that?
So we have it going for our projects because they don't require the official Alexa skill set approval, but we're still in the middle of that Alexa skill set approval for being more generally available.
Okay,
so
got it. So I'll just, sorry to interrupt you, but I want to get a little bit to a broader question that I think you as a company are going to have to address, and I want to understand it better myself, is, is Josh a direct competitor? Is JoshAI a direct competitor to a product like Amazon Echo or Google Home, or are there ways that these two products can work together in a symbiotic type of relationship?
Oh, we're already working well together. I mean, it's not at all competitive today. It's unclear with the big companies where they're going to try to go in the future. But today, what's interesting is we'll look at it from two different angles, sort of our perspective and then their perspective. So from our perspective, we don't have the ability to give away hardware at a loss, right? And to do it in a beautiful form factor that is widely available, that has really great technology. And that's what Google Home and the Amazon Echo are. They're these fantastic far field microphones in a great package that the consumer is literally getting for less money than it takes the manufacturer to produce. And so that is awesome for us because in order for voice control throughout the home to work, you need to have a receiver, a microphone, pretty much around wherever you're trying to give the command, or it's not going to work. So we recommend to our customers to get Amazon Dots, and basically we pair those with Josh so they can do any of the native Josh controls from those devices. That being said, we're only really taking advantage of the microphone. The thing that's interesting is if there's anything that we don't do, so some of the more personality related questions and skills that aren't all about home automation, they can basically go directly to Alexa in the Echo case and ask Alexa who won, the Grammys in 2012 or whatever the question happens to be. And then they can as easily go to Josh and say, turn everything off in the living room. And so that seems to be a really great opportunity for us right now. For them, what we've been told by Amazon, and again, we have to be careful of understanding that they might change this, but what we've been told by them is they're very much a voice interface, a control system, or not a control system, a voice interface that feeds into a control system. They're not trying to be the control system or the brain of the home. So that's why they announced the Crestron and the Control 4 integrations. The idea is that they understand it's the control system that's doing a lot of the heavy lifting, and they're basically taking the voice and converting the voice into the action. And so from that perspective, they look at us as a partner the same way that they look at Crestron and Control 4. We're a native control system that integrates right into all the products that a homeowner is going to have. And we do some really sophisticated things on top of that. So it enables them to say, Alexa can power your CD at home, where Alexa by itself really couldn't, but Alexa plus Josh can get you there.
Makes perfect sense. So you alluded to it, doing some very sophisticated things on top of that, with Echo is just basically feeding you the input and then you're able to go and run with it. And I know that that's really one of the differentiators for JoshAI is the level of sophistication and natural language processing. And I don't know that we've really done a good job of hitting on that in this conversation. So I want to make sure that we do talk about that ability to handle multiple commands and the ability for JoshAI to really understand a more natural language than maybe a device like Amazon Echo could.
Sure. So I think we just need a very quick primer on how voice works. And the fact is, not all voice systems are the same. We've had voice control going back decades now, and the Savant remotes had it for at least since the last Cedia. And Crestron's had some basic voice control for I think about 10 years now. The problem is those are very hard-coded command line systems. They basically say, if the user says this exact phrase, it's going to do this exact thing. It's basically running a macro. And that concept is what is going away. That's sort of the clunky, kludgy way of doing voice control that leaves the homeowner saying, this doesn't really work or it doesn't work well. What we've done is we've come in and we've said, it's not about giving the user or even the integrator the responsibility of having to give an exact match for what they want to control. It's about creating an architectural hierarchy of what goes on in a home so that you can then create very natural sentences around it. So for example, we abstract a home to be a building that contains floors, floors contain rooms, and rooms contain devices. Devices then have various states and types, and those devices can basically be operated regardless of any specific wording. So for example, if you were to say, turn off the lights on the first floor, that's not a command that the integrator is programming. It's not even a command that we necessarily have to program. It's a command that's implicit in the architecture because we understand that there's a first floor that has these rooms that have these devices. And for the lights that are on those floors, those can be turned on or off, or they can be dimmed if they have that capability, or color change. So what we've done is we've said, by keeping a very sort of broad understanding of this is what a home is and this is what a home contains, we enable some really cool things, one of which we call complex commands. And that's the ability to naturally rattle off a series of commands and have them all work. So I could say, play Bob Dylan in the kitchen, open the shades, and lock the door. And the ability to just say that naturally in one breath without having to make it a single command line input, that's part of what our customers seem to get really excited about. It's finally making voice actually natural. What's interesting to mention about that is the way that Amazon structured Alexa based on the skills is you basically enter into a skill and that skill executes a command. So for example, we've all seen the invocations, Alexa, tell device X to do something. Because of the way that's structured, it's not really easy to be able to rattle off multiple commands. And an example I'll give of the granularity behind this, you could say, play the Beatles in the kitchen. It makes sense to us, play the Beatles, play X in the room, right, in the Y. However, there's a band called Explosions in the Sky. So if you said play Explosions in the Sky, the system needs to understand that in this case is not switching to a room, that's still part of the artist. And so if you said play Explosions in the Sky in the kitchen, the idea is the system needs to sort of understand that. And so complex commands are all about understanding when a sentence breaks, when a concept breaks, and when a concept doesn't. So another example is turn on the lights and the fan in the kitchen. In that case, you're sort of having to combine some, disparate concepts that are spoken. It sounds natural to us, but for a computer, those are very sort of weird things that are said, and we have to combine them in a very smart way. I was going to say, it's interesting, though, to look at Google Home may work more like how we work and less like how Alexa works, which is exciting because it means it might be way more natural to speak to, and I'm kind of excited to play with it.
Yeah, that's one of the things you showed me at CEDIA was the voice control and how you could chain commands together and speak naturally, and the system would pick up the intricacies of the conversation you were having with it. And I think I've said this on the show before. The Alexa feels like a command prompt. You have to go in, you have to type, ls dash la. You have to put the exact things in, and when you hit enter, it'll work. But if you say any one of those things kind of off, it's probably not going to work or fall flat on its face or say, I don't know. Same thing can happen with Siri from time to time. But I really liked what you guys had at the show because it was like very conversational speech. Turn on the lights in the bedroom and the bathroom, and it goes ahead and does it. It's pretty cool. How did the CEDIA show go for you? How the channel there and dealers coming to the booth receive the new product?
CEDIA was such an awesome experience. It was a complete exhaustive weekend, though. We came out of CEDIA basically with no downtime, no time to eat, no time to go to the bathroom, just ready to collapse, but in a good way. Like the interest was pretty great. The things that we took away, though, that were interesting was one, and I think you guys have spoken about this on the show, leading with voice as sort of how we market Josh is probably not the most appropriate way because we do so much more. And so we've begun to change our pitch a little bit to make sure that what we do is better represented. The other thing is we met so many international integrators, and voice control is really tricky when you start getting beyond just the US. We have a few interesting things in development for it, but it sort of lit a fire that we need to be moving faster at developing multiple languages and more international support because of how relevant that is in the CEDIA community. It's terrible to just lock into the United States and say this is the only market that matters, because it doesn't.
Right. It's what Amazon started off with, the US English. They've moved to UK, and I guess they're doing the UK English, but Google Home will launch with 40 plus languages and dialects. So that's crazy to think about, that it can actually understand strange dialects and other languages. I was looking through them, a list of them online, and just blown away as to how many different languages you could potentially use to control your home.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's going to be exciting. I think CEDIA next year, we're going to see English as, only one component of what voice control is doing. I think we're going to see some really cool advancements from all of us in a number of different countries and languages, for sure.
Yeah. Well, Alex, we're running a little bit close to our time here. I do want to thank you very much for coming on the show. As I understand, JoshAI is shipping now. How's that going?
Very well. It's I hate to keep bringing up Tesla, but kind of like Tesla, the idea is that they're pre-orders and then they're customers, and there's a line, and we start with number 1 and then move to number 2. Right now, we've got a queue that's probably backed up until the end of the year. We're hoping to get everything out before December, but for new orders, it seems like we're likely pushing already into 2017, just based on how much demand we're seeing. So it's pretty exciting for us.
Awesome. Well, I want to echo what Seth said, and thank you so much for taking the time to come on. I'm sure it's a really busy time for you guys. If our listeners were interested in learning a little bit more about the product or connecting with you, what would be the best way for them to do that?
The website is josh.ai, and they can email me at alex@josh.ai. Happy to chat.
Very good. And one last question that we wanted to make sure we got in. Where did the name come from?
It was initially a placeholder. It was a friend of Tim's that we thought it was just kind of a fun place to start with. And what we found was it really grew on people. Everyone associates Josh with someone they know, whether a cousin, relative, or just neighbor. But if you Google the name Josh, one of the first results is the Urban Dictionary result, which basically says, Josh is a fun-loving guy. He is a little bit slow to start, but when he warms up, you'll fall in love. And we thought that was perfect.
That's great.
There you go. All right. Well, yeah, we wanted to make sure we got that in there. I'm sure you get that question a lot. It makes a lot of sense. For anybody listening who does want to get a recap of this, we will have all of the information, including some of the links and stuff that we talked about here in our show notes at HomeTech.fm/131. So, Alex, thank you again so much for taking the time to come on and join us.
Definitely. Thank you, guys.
All right. Take care.